Hello and welcome back to our C++ primer course for beginners. In this episode we'll be looking at pointers, explaining what they are, how we use them and understanding all the symbology that we see with their syntax. So let's get started. So a big part of playing with C++ is dealing with things called pointers. And we're going to go through and explain what pointers are and how and why we use them. So the first thing to note is when we define a variable, it's usually something like this. So int x equals 4, for example. And if we define this, we're basically just saying x is equal to 4 as an integer. Pretty simple thing like that. But you will also see the case of using something like this, where we do int asterisk px equals the ampersand of x. Okay, so you'll see something like this. Okay, look, now this looks very confusing. There's lots of stuff going on in it, but essentially, let's break this down. So whenever you see the asterisk symbol next to a integer or float or any kind of variable type declaration, this is basically saying it's going to point to an integer slot of an address. A pointer is just an address of a variable. Okay, so when we assign x equals 4, that is actually setting an address in memory to equal 4. What the pointer's doing is that this is returning the address. So this is what the ampersand does. The ampersand before the x means get the address of x. So whatever this value is, put that in there. So px is actually equal to the address of our x value. And this asterisk here is saying that px is a pointer, and then particularly a integer pointer. So it's basically saying the thing that this points to is an address of an integer. So let's show how you can do this, use this to modify the address. But before that, let's actually show you the address. So I can do cout and do px. Okay, and if I do push play, you will see it print out the memory address of that variable int x equals 4. That's what this is. So what I can also do is print out the contents of px. So to get the contents of px, where it's pointing to, I can use the asterisk symbol again to do what we call dereference. So using the asterisk without a type dereferences it. So now we should get the value of 4 printing out. Like so, 4. And that means I can do other things to this to increase the value of x equals 4, for example, without actually having to send it all across. I can just go into here and do px plus equals 5. Okay. And there we go. So let's now push play on there. And you see the value of 9 comes up because it's 4 plus 5. This is very useful if you want to say grab items and say a struct and want to change one element of that struct without having to send over and copy all the information across. It saves you a lot of hassle. You can just send over just the bit that you want to change. So we'll do some examples of this later on, but that's essentially what we're doing here. We are just changing the value of an address. So rather than referencing it directly, we can reference straight to the memory address itself. This is also useful when we do things like memory allocation for static and dynamic memory allocation. Again, we'll do more complex video talk about that later on. But just so you know what pointers are just the address value of a variable. So just the address. And again, to reiterate what these symbols mean. So when you have an asterisk with a type, it just defines the variable here as a pointer. And it'd be an integer it's pointing to. The ampersand is the address of x. Okay, so it will just get us whatever the address is using for x and apply it to this. And px plus equals 5 will get us this value, dereferenced from px, which gives us 4 plus 5, 9. And when we see out, we're seeing out the contents, which is this asterisk on its own, dereferencing, getting that content out again. Pointers are one of those things that's going to be completely confusing at first, and you'll get used to them and get used to reading them. But if you just think about they're just getting an address of a variable, it helps that along. But it will take time to get used to it, unfortunately. But when you do, it all works well. And there we go. We've now got a brief introduction to pointers. We're going to be using them more later on as we show them in more use cases and where they can be useful. So make sure you stick around for later videos in the series. Speaking of that, in the next episode, we'll be looking at how to create functions, how to create them, how to call them, and how to give them parameters to use. You can watch the next episode right now on patreon.com/Ryan Daly. We can find all my videos early before everyone else from just $1 a month. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.